In the Pokemon Trading Card Game, effects that move opposing bench Pokemon to the active spot are some of the strongest in the game. The prime example is Boss's Orders, which was played in the 2023 TCG World Championship Final to finish the game. Boss's Orders and similar cards are important for every format of the Pokemon TCG, especially Gym Leader Challenge, where so many such cards are legal. Let's go over Gym Leader Challenge cards similar to Boss's Orders. Gym Leader Challenge, or GLC, is a Pokemon TCG format that allows one copy of any card name per deck, allows one type of Pokemon per deck, excludes Rulebox cards, and legalizes cards printed in and after the Black and White base set expansion. These are additional rules added to the standard rules of the TCG. For more information on the format, you can check out the rules and FAQ pages at gymleaderchallenge.com. If you are just starting to learn the Pokemon TCG, I recommend learning some of the basics from the official Pokemon website. In this video, I'll go over the following. What are boss effects? How are boss effects useful? Cards with boss effects, and cards that stop boss effects. Let's start with the Pokemon TCG playing field, which has a particular layout. Each player has a Pokemon in the active spot and can have up to 5 Pokemon behind it on the bench. A player can lose if they have no Pokemon in play, so players are incentivized to play some Pokemon on their bench. Boss's Orders let you switch in one of your opponent's benched Pokemon to the active spot. Many players refer to this card and its effect as just Boss. Boss is useful for many reasons. First, it enables you to knock out a Pokemon of your choice. Unless stated otherwise, a player can use an attack printed on their active Pokemon to deal damage or some attack effect once at the end of their turn. Most attacks can only be applied to the opposing active Pokemon and have no effect on the opposing bench. Often, your opponent has a bench Pokemon that you want to attack. Boss lets you move that Pokemon into the active spot and attack it. Boss is also useful to isolate a Pokemon in the active spot. A player can move their Pokemon from the active spot and replace it with a bench Pokemon by paying its retreat cost. Boss on a Pokemon with high retreat cost makes it difficult for your opponent to retreat into a more useful Pokemon and can give you an extra turn. Boss is useful for these and other more niche use cases. Let's go over the cards similar to Boss, starting with the card itself. Boss was originally printed as the card Lysander in Flashfire during the XY era, but it was later changed to Boss's Orders. Due to a ruling, you can only play one of Boss or Lysander in a GLC deck. Boss appears in most GLC decks since it allows a player to chase particular Pokemon and break opposing strategies. However, it doesn't appear in every single deck because there exists a better version of the effect in a card called Guzma. Guzma came out in Burning Shadows during the Sun and Moon era. Switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active Pokemon. If you do, switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. It's basically the combination of Boss and Switch. It requires that your opponent has a Pokemon on the bench to be played, so if your opponent has no Pokemon on their bench, you cannot play Guzma just for its Switch effect. If you have at least one Pokemon on your bench, the Switch is mandatory, so be careful about which Pokemon you send to the active spot. Guzma is typically better than Boss because of the extra Switch effect, which is useful against control decks and for moving Pokemon without paying their retreat cost. For this reason, every competitive GLC deck contains it. Countercatcher is an item card that came out in Crimson Invasion during the Sun and Moon era. You can use this card only if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent. Switch in one of your opponent's benched Pokemon to the active spot. Basically, it is Boss on an item card that can only be played when you are in a losing position. Boss and Guzma require your once per turn supporter use. Countercatcher is more flexible since a player can play any number of item cards during their turn. However, most decks prefer to be ahead rather than behind, so Countercatcher sees scattered play. It is most useful in control decks and can pair well with Call Signal Magneton and Mysterious Message Mismagius. The remaining cards with similarities to Boss are not as commonly played. I'll briefly go through the trainers and Pokemon with abilities and describe why they tend not to see play. Pokemon Catcher is an item card that is Boss on a coin flip, which makes the card inconsistent for GLC. Boss and Guzma are more consistent. Toy Catcher is an item card that can boss a Pokemon with 50 HP or less remaining. Most Pokemon have more than 50 HP, so this card is not playable on average. Chantal is a supporter card that is similar to Pokemon Catcher. There are many better boss effects, so I would not recommend playing this card. 9 Temptations Ninetales. Fire decks have several ways to get basic fire energy into hand. Professor's Letter, Fire Crystal, Giant Hearth, Training Court, and Clara are commonly played cards in fire decks that help activate 9 Temptations. However, it tends to be a little energy hungry, especially since the same energy needs to be used for attacking. Bright Look Ninetales is another Ninetales card with a boss effect. Unlike Nine Temptations, Bright Look does not require any other cards to activate so long as Ninetales is evolved from hand. But that means you can't use this ability with Evo Soda, and it can only activate once on evolution. There's also Flare Command Pyroar. There are several cards that work well with Pyroar in fire decks: Welder, Blacksmith, Magma Basin, Mela, and Raihan. Fire decks with attackers that are less energy reliant can take advantage of Flare Command. However, many strong fire attackers like Blazeball Entei and Concentrated Fire Torkoal are energy reliant. I think Nine Temptations, Bright Look, and Flare Command are all solid abilities, but they haven't seen much competitive play. Fire decks that I've seen instead run support Pokemon like Smooth Over Macargo and Mystical Fire Delphox to fix consistency issues. Spidernet Ariados is a Dark-type Pokemon that is similar to Bright Look Ninetales, but it can only target evolution Pokemon, so it is much worse. Assaulting Hunt Weavile is another Dark-type Pokemon with a boss ability. Many Dark decks have extra switch options like Zoroark, Scoop Up Net, and Escape Rope, so activating the ability is not difficult. However, it's not flexible because it can only boss basic Pokemon. The main reason this Weavile isn't played though, is that there are two better Weavile cards: Evil Admonition Weavile and Rule of Evil Weavile. Dragon Wind Salamence. The ability is boss once per turn, which is good, but the Pokemon does not do much outside of its ability. You're better off running the Intimidating Roar Salamence, which has a much better attack and okay ability. Loopy Lasso Venusaur. This ability is inconsistent and is generally worse than Jungle Totem Venusaur, though it could maybe work in a control deck with Slumbering Forest. There are a few other boss abilities, namely Fragrance Trap Victory Bell, Captivating Rhythm Ludicolo, and Delicious Aroma Appleton. Similar to Loopy Lasso, these abilities are inconsistent and I would not recommend playing them without a specific strategy. There are so many different boss effects that you might ask yourself what you can do to stop them. The short answer is that there are very few cards that can stop boss. Typically, the best method of stopping boss is to prevent your opponent from having the card in their hand. If you suspect your opponent has boss in hand disruption from cards like N, Marnie, and Iono can shuffle your opponent's hand back into the deck and prevent them from finding boss on their turn. From the games I've seen, I found two Pokemon that can counteract boss. Blizzard Veil Articuno is one of the best answers to boss. Boss and Guzma are both supporter cards that have no effect when this ability is in the active spot. Strategies that benefit from an extra turn of setup like Super Cold Excalibur paired with Special Waves Wailord work well with Articuno. Its usage has seen a decline with more people playing Ancient Trait Articuno, but Blizzard Veil is a good enough ability to continue seeing usage. Princess's Curtain Diancie is slightly worse than Blizzard Veil Articuno. It has the same ability, except it only protects basic Pokemon, so evolution Pokemon are still vulnerable to Boss and Guzma. It's not a bad card for Psychic control decks, but I don't think it is good in other Psychic decks. Thanks for watching to the end. I hope you learned something about boss effects. If you are just getting into the format, let me know if this video helped you and if there is anything I can do better. Bop!